not the best day in the history. Well, look, let's start with the Pastor Protection Bill, which passed the House, the Louisiana State House, by what was it, 80-18, right?
Yeah, it was a landslide, and look, the bill was a very simple measure. It just was going to do one simple thing: ensure that religious leaders can't be forced by the government in this state to conduct a wedding ceremony that violates their sincerely held religious belief. I
And
mean,
so and so yesterday it's in the Senate committee, the other side, and the committee kills it by what, one vote, right?
by one vote, yeah. And look, I think it was a very consequential vote, and I think people need to understand what's going on down here. I mean, look, it's jeopardized the religious freedom, probably the tax exempt status of Orthodox churches, conservative clergy, and churches throughout our state.
Pardon me, Mike. Explain to folks why that is I think, very legitimate fear of yours.
Well, it's not just mine. It's the concern and the fear of constitutional law experts and legislators around the country, which is why other states have already passed very similar measures like this. And all of it comes out of the U.S. Supreme Court. It was 11 months ago the Solicitor General of the United States was arguing in the Obergefell case, which, of course, by a vote of 5-4, the Supreme Court has forced same-sex marriage in all 50 states. And in the oral argument in the case, the Solicitor General said, look, the tax-exempt status of religious institutions that object to this concept of same-sex marriage is going to be an issue. And that's just one of the many concerns that we have about those who are not going to go along with this. So, look, we ought to live and let live. Same-sex marriage is the law of the land now, according to 5 justices. That's fine. We'll do that. But we have to balance our freedoms. You have to balance the fundamental right to religious liberty with this new and elevated right of sexual liberty, and that's what all the states are struggling to do. And this act, the Pastor Protection Act, would have done that, would have struck that balance perfectly, and yet we go down by one vote in the Senate.
Let me ask you this, Mike. There's some undertones here. The governor indicated he would have signed it, but there are others who are saying he really helped kill it on the Senate side. What's the truth?
Look, I can't prove it, but I do believe that happened. The governor has a lot of sway, particularly in the Senate. The House is we have a Republican majority, conservatives, and we're working really hard. We passed some great legislation this year, but it goes to the Senate committees to die. And we're getting very frustrated by that, and we're going to have to do something about it eventually. But yeah, I think the governor and others sent the message that they wanted this legislation to die, and that's what happened.
Do you think part of the reason that John Bell didn't want it, assuming for the moment that JBE didn't think it was a good idea, do you think that part of that was based on, I'll say, ungrounded fear of national backlash like in some of the other states, Georgia, North Carolina, etc.?
No, I think he's smart enough to realize that this bill doesn't have anything to do with those things. This bill, almost identical language, has already passed in larger states like Texas and Florida and several others where it's pending, and they haven't had any backlash from business at all, because all this did was carve out a tiny little space to protect clergy. It just said you couldn't be forced to perform a wedding. So that didn't have anything to do with...
Then why do you think John Bell didn't want it? Why do you think his minions in the Senate shot it down?
Well, I think that it's just not a comfortable thing for him because of some of his constituencies, maybe promises he made on the campaign trail. So he knew he couldn't come out publicly and say he opposed it because that'd be ridiculous. And look, we had an army of clergy from all races, denominations, and everything at the Capitol yesterday. They are desperate to have something protection like this passed, and so the governor just wanted to avoid that, and so he did. And by one vote, they got it done.
Also in Senate committee yesterday, sanctuary cities, a bill that would have banned sanctuary cities in Louisiana, was also defeated. Tell us about that. And
same story here.
Did the governor pull some strings on that one?
I believe he did. And Attorney General Jeff Landry and I and other legislators worked very hard on the sanctuary cities ban because, look, it's important. It's crucial to maintain order and national security, the rule of law. I mean, not only are illegal aliens in Louisiana receiving benefits at our taxpayers' expense, but some of them are violent criminals. We know that. We can prove it, and they're jeopardizing the safety of every law-abiding citizen in the state. And yet, the city of New Orleans, famously, is harboring these folks. And so we just needed a simple measure to say you can't do that. And if you make that choice, then it's going to affect your bonding capacity. You're not going to be able to get the money from the state if you do that. We're just trying to get them to enforce federal immigration law. It's important, but there again, in this committee hearing, it was a circus. It went on for like 2 hours, and we wind up losing it by one vote. And it is just an outrage. It really is.
And we had a local senator absent. Is that accurate?
Well, on that one, we had Senator Ryan Gaddy voted with us, and he's Bossier area, in Webster, and Senator Milkovich was not in the room. I'm not sure. He might have been working on another piece of legislation elsewhere in the building, but I didn't see him.
He could have saved you, huh? He could have saved it.
I believe he would have voted with us. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a common sense vote. So yeah, it's an outrage.
When because you guys, I'm not going to say talk out of school a little bit, but lawmakers talk to lawmakers, and as you're in the legislative cafeteria or bar, whichever it happens to be, and guys are sort of talking behind the scenes, what was the reason that the Democrats that you talk to, what is the reason, do you think, that John Bell and other high-powered Dems, or as I referred to them earlier, ersatz Republicans, would want a sanctuary cities ban to fail?
It's patently absurd to me. But they came to the table and made arguments about how we want to be warm and friendly and inviting and all of this. They were citing Bible verses. I'm like, look, guys, the Bible also gives the civil authorities the obligation, the responsibility, ordained by God, if you want to make this a religious argument, to maintain order and to maintain the rule of law. In fact, the Bible says that civil authority is God's agent of wrath to make sure that people are following the law so that they would have order. And it's just ridiculous. It's a political thing. I think that frankly, to be real frank, since you teed it up for me, Robert, I think when they bring in a lot of illegal aliens, ultimately they're hoping that some of them will get amnesty and that maybe they'll have more voters for their side. I mean, that's all I can figure, because it otherwise makes no sense.
Mike, another subject real quick. How embarrassed are you by what's gone on on the House side with regard to women and that the bill that with Kenny Havard and the others throwing dollars on the podium? How embarrassing is that to you?
It was really not our finest moment, to be honest. And I really was. I was watching it in dismay. I couldn't believe it was actually happening. The legislature is not a fraternity house. And look, all these are. Kenny Havard's a good man. I've known him for a while. He's a good guy, and he didn't mean anything by it. You have to think through what this looks like. What is what's the reputation of the body itself, the decorum? I went down to the floor and spoke on behalf of that bill, raising the age of exotic dancers to 21 from 18, because I have daughters. It's important. It's a human trafficking concern. All sorts of terrible things are happening there. And, I went down right after all of that happened. And, he regrets it now. He has apologized, at least to the members. And I told him, I said, Kenny, you need to apologize to the world about it. You need to set this right and let them know who you really are, because there's a lot of misconception about that now.